why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank everybody for your patience. And so let's just do a little bit of level setting, if we could, about this panel. So we're talking more about second stage companies in their second stage businesses in this round. So in the first, there's another panel happening for micro enterprises and early stage businesses, but let's just talk a little bit about what a second stage business is, so that we all can kind of agree on what we're talking about. And actually, before we do that, I just jumping right into questions. Let's do some introductions. Colleen, let's start with you. Who you are and who you represent.
Sure, thanks, Brian. I am Colleen Killen-Roberts, and I'm the Vice President of Entrepreneurship at the Edward Lowe Foundation. And we are a national foundation that advocates and supports second stage businesses.
Excellent. Deanna?
I am Deanna Callahan. I am the Managing Director of Endeavor here in Michigan, and I lead the Great Lakes region for our organization. We are a network of over 2,100 high growth founders across the world, and we currently have offices in 40 countries. And basically, what we do is we help founders think bigger, scale up, and give back to their communities. In essence, we're like a concierge service or a little black book of resources for our founders.
Little black book. Awesome. All right, and Carla.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me. I am Carla Walker-Miller, CEO of Walker-Miller Energy Services, and we change lives through energy efficiency. But I am also the Executive Committee Chair of Detroit Means Business, which is Detroit's small business ecosystem leader. And our goal is to elevate and scale services to small and mid-sized businesses based on the voices of those small businesses.
Excellent. So let's stay with you for a minute, Carla. What is so second stage business, what does that mean?
That's an interesting question to me, because I know of businesses that have been in existence for 10 years and are still startups, and businesses that are second stage after a very short time. But for me, it means that you are stabilized, you're poised for growth, you're adding employees, and you have mature processes and systems.
And thank you for that. And maybe, Colleen, if you could supplement that with the way that your the way that your foundation looks at this, because it's hard to draw these lines and exactly who we're talking about, how you define things, and yet if you want to ask a question about how are these types of businesses doing, you kind of have to draw the line somewhere. So how does the Edward Lowe Foundation look at this?
Sure. We typically we say 10 to 99 employees roughly, and 1 to 50 million in sales, with an intention to grow. These companies have proven themselves in the market. As Clara has said, they've been around for a while, and they also have proof of management. They know how to run the organization. So that's roughly how we define it. And there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but as you say, you have to have some way to cut it off.
So why don't we get in then to some of the challenges and that these businesses are facing. So in terms of growth, and we know second stage companies tend to be growth oriented, what are some of the growth challenges of having more employees as compared to being a micro business? When we think of businesses as they mature. When you start out, you've got your family, you've got maybe some friends, maybe a high school buddy or somebody that, but at some point the work outgrows your friends and family. And so let's talk about some of the challenges in staffing up and getting to that point. Diana.
Well, you just said it right there, staffing up. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we hear for all of our companies. I've been talking to, most of our portfolio all across the state of Michigan about what are their main challenges that they're facing right now. And for the vast majority of them, it's talent. It's identifying C-suite talent that can help them go from 1 million to 10 million, 10 million to 100 million, or 100 million to $1 billion. So it's looking for that top talent. The governor talked a little bit about technical talent earlier in today's conversation. And that's another area where we see a big need. It's identifying talent locally or even nationally now that we've been able to open up hiring, as a remote, in a remote way. But to be able to attract and retain technical talent is something that is consistently a need. And the third under the umbrella of talent is leveling up existing talent here. So when we're looking at growth companies and companies kind of in the second stage, how do we level up the talent that we already have so that they are well positioned to be able to help the company in its next step? So talent is really number one. And number two, and we talked also about this in the panels earlier, it's access to capital, and equitable access to capital. And I can talk about that a little bit later, but ensuring that people in this growth stage have enough capital to be able to get them from that 1 million to 10 to 100, or 100 to a billion. There's definitely other challenges that we're seeing. Those are two of the biggers, but it's also access to peers and mentors. It's access to markets outside of Michigan, and it's access to leadership development support for themselves and their C-suite.
So Carla, why don't you pick it up there and talk about some of these challenges, particularly with growth and increasing employees, but not everybody faces the same types of challenges as they grow. And what sorts of things do the policymakers need to focus on in order to, or at least what are some of the intricacies, the differences, this particularly tough challenges that businesses are facing that we want to make sure don't get overlooked?
Yeah, access to capital is always mentioned, but access to the right type of capital at the right time. My business is a 20-year-old business, but we almost failed during the recession when all capital was basically rescinded for small businesses. And one of the most important lessons I learned, and I think I hope the policymakers will take this into consideration, is that relationships are key to nearly every issue we're talking about. The lessons of the recession taught me to develop a close relationship with my bank, and that served me during the COVID crisis because my bank walked us through, and we were one of the few mid-sized businesses that actually got the first tranche of the PPP. It was purely due to the work that we did with relationships. So second stage business is having strong, abiding relationships with banks, with policymakers, with business serving organizations, making sure people know who you are. Otherwise, I feel that, and many small and mid-sized businesses feel that much policy is being made in a vacuum with solutions from the past. And listening to the voices of small businesses is a big deal. Diana mentioned technical, we keep using the term technical assistance, but businesses in my stage need hands-on support. We need boots on the ground who can come in and help us get things done, not just train us to do things. Because business owners are working during their internal work between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., not during business hours. So for every training session, there need to be, there's a group called MBA Response that really served many of the small businesses in Detroit well, because they literally provided people to come in and help remove barriers as opposed to a training course. So really high touch solutions. And Diana also mentioned mentors, sponsors, mentors, relationships, access to networks is really, really important.
Yeah, all really excellent, insightful points. One of the things that we learned at our association, the Small Business Association of Michigan, was that people did not want to just be to be referred to a recording of a webinar or referred to a document to read, but to really talk through the intricacies of their business, their situation, how something, a rule, a program, qualifications of their business applied to a very specific situation. And it required a much more intensive one-on-one type of consultation than what I think a lot of assistance organizations were were designed or kind of programmed to offer. I want to drill into this mentorship question a bit if we can, and I'll go to Colleen for this because I know over the last year or so that the Edward Lowe Foundation has really leaned into this notion that business owners need mentors as they grow. And so tell us a little bit about what's happening there and what you've seen as you've gotten into it.
Yeah, thank you. So, we found that as we launched this program, Brian, it was rare that our entrepreneurs had an opportunity to have a formal mentor in their whole career. To have this dedicated one-to-one mentor in which it matches folks who are further on the path with those who are just starting out is not something that we see very often, and especially during the pandemic, when everybody's cheese got moved, so to speak, everything changed. So when you're just starting to move into that second stage space and things become more complicated, we're finding that it's just very needed to have a trusted advisor on your side. In fact, one of our entrepreneurs who went through the program said it's the single best thing that he's ever done since he started his business. So, 77 entrepreneurs later, it's a program that's growing strong, and we'll continue to build on it for all those reasons.
And done, we should probably call out done in partnership with MEDC.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Really recognize this as an important component of the future. Diana, with Endeavor, maybe tell us a little bit about how people get connected. You talked a lot about networks. What about mentors?
So, we see that as part of the network. So, and we see mentors as being other entrepreneurs, but also investors and people who look like you in the community who are industry leaders. So, as Colleen was mentioning, it's important to find other entrepreneurs or other people in the industry that are one step ahead of you. And so what Endeavor does is we kind of break it open from being just a hyper-local program, and we look for the right mentors nationally and globally from companies who've been able to grow and scale their businesses successfully. And it's a lot very similar to what Colleen was talking about, that when you can have somebody who's actually gone through it and who understands the challenges and has either failed or successfully mitigated those challenges, it's a lot more fruitful than I think what Carla was talking about, where it's just having somebody throw information or technical assistance at you. You have somebody who's been able to do it and to do it successfully. But mentorship can be in many different areas. When some of our entrepreneurs have challenges in HR, or they're raising a round, or they're having issues with culture change because they're growing and scaling too rapidly, or operations, sometimes it's not the founder who's the right person to be in that room. Sometimes it's, industry leaders or people who have expertise in those functions who are the right people to put in the room. So I think, and I believe Carla mentioned this earlier too, the biggest thing is to listen to the founders, really truly understand what their challenges are at a human level and at a business level, and identifying the right mentors to help them mitigate some of those challenges.
Carla, as the economy recovers, and we all want to maximize the opportunity that is in front of us, some pent up demand, we've seen some good startup activity happening, but we've also seen businesses kind of regain confidence and ready to get out there and make the most of it. What are the keys to unlocking growth for second stage companies? What are the main things that count the most or matter the most at a time like this?
I like the governor's term. She said, unleash the potential as we recover. And I want to just mention one thing, because the recovery is happening, but it is so important that recovery be equitable. That's something that did not happen with the other recovery. So, right back to networks and relationships. Our relationships are more likely to be with people who look like us. And because the critical mass of business owners and the faces of business owners are white, then that recovery has, without intervention, it will once again exclude Black and brown people. and women largely. So the intentionality is really important. But we need the things that we always needed. But I want to just keep stressing the fact that high touch support. And we keep using the term technical assistance, and most of the business serving organizations use the term technical assistance, but we need assistance, period. It may be technical, it may be IT or commerce, e-commerce related, but it may just be someone to sit there and put your numbers into your Excel spreadsheet because you absolutely don't have the time. Brian, you mentioned culture. And as my business has grown, that is the biggest struggle. The soldiers who were with me at the beginning doing absolutely anything and everything, now they have assigned places, right? You know, we have structure. And to be honest, they struggle with the fact that they're not having to block and tackle and that there are other people who are doing things. So helping us to help our team grow and mature, gain that emotional intelligence and expand, be willing to expand and grow together as a much larger team has really been a challenge. We have leaned into culture. It is the thing that makes everything else work, is having a culture of kind excellence and inclusive stewardship. But sometimes that's the thing that businesses neglect easily as they grow. But it is one of the most important things that that a business can establish, and that is the culture.
Yeah, excellent point. And there's and it's hard to write a handbook on that. I mean, it really is, it feeds right back into this relationships, mentors, people that have been there, done that, key insights. And let's drill down a little bit into this, to the question of equity, because I think that we can, it's going to be easy to get lost in top line economic statistics. Those are the ones that hit the headlines. Those are the ones that people zero in on. Those are the ones that make the commercials, you know, what the unemployment rate is, what the GDP growth rate is, and, you know, how much recovery we've had. But underneath those top lines, you have some people that are doing way better and others that that are really still struggling, and their recovery hasn't even really started. So Diana, maybe just talk a little bit about this need to essentially keep in mind, be intentional about our recovery and ensuring that we're not mesmerized by a top line that looks pretty good when the storyline underneath that might be radically different between different people.
It's a great question, and you know, one statistic that I saw recently, it was the MVCA report that came out recently that showed that only 22% of venture capital went to companies with a founder that was a woman, a person of color, or somebody from the LGBTQ community. It also showed that in comparison to national averages, venture capital was lower than the national average across all three of those populations. So we have work to do to make sure that our funding at all levels, and this is just venture capital, but all different types of capital, is more equitable. I think that's a no-brainer. I know that a lot of our peers kind of in the community are trying harder and being better in this space, but the other side of that is that the makeup of the teams at a lot of the different funds are also predominantly made up of white men. So there's room to be more representative of our communities. There's room to make sure that the staff looks like our communities, represents our communities, and invests in our communities more equitably. I think for a state like Michigan, where, you know, we are incredibly diverse, we come from communities all across the globe. It's critically important to get this right. And at all levels, I think we're talking about micro businesses, which is hugely important, but even businesses that are well positioned to grow and scale, which are often the ones who are, you know, significant economic drivers, that revenue drivers, job drivers, and investment drivers into our region. we need to be very thoughtful in that space as well. So I completely agree with what Carla said. I think we need to be very intentional about where our money is going and also the makeup of our organizations across the state.
So Carla, let's pick up there, but now kind of talk about the some of the gaps that exist in the type of programming and services that we need. I mean, we know that is part of what this summit is about. So we've got policymakers that are listening. We have the folks at the state that put together programs and budgets and decide things to support and how they're going to structure in the future. And they also have, to go along with that desire to do something, resources that have come in from the federal government. So there is kind of an opportunity in front of us here to build something different, to build something better, to build something that is impactful or transformational even. What are the biggest gaps in the support network for these types of businesses, particularly the growth-oriented ones that we know from the great work that the Edward Lowe Foundation does, the type of companies that the majority of job growth comes from? So what are the gaps? What are some things that we can really focus on in the future to make sure that we unleash that potential?
As Colleen has said, and Diana, hands-on, customized support. The business support ecosystem has grown in Detroit really rapidly over the last 5 years, but it really has grown on basically a cohort, heavily training-focused model. And we absolutely need to shift to a high-touch, customized support model where you are, again, listening to each business and what that business needs. The second huge opportunity that I think exists here is that small businesses, especially in Detroit, especially Black and brown businesses, are very focused in the service industry. And right now, the opportunity for every reason, because of the money, because of the growth in technology, because of the electrification, because of the climate change investment, the opportunity for small and second stage businesses to grow and expand in new areas, in emerging areas and emerging technologies. That's something that businesses can't do on their own because they don't know what the opportunities and the possibilities are. So as the people who are receiving information about economic growth, they really need to connect businesses, business owners, entrepreneurs to the growth opportunities so that the existing businesses can expand and new businesses can enter growth opportunities, as opposed to falling into doing what we do. Entrepreneurs, we start businesses because we know how to do something well, but what we know to do is limited by our life experience. So show us what needs to be done and we will do it.
Great. Colleen, same question.
Yeah, thank you. Carla, I love that you said that relationships are key. Dan Wyan, our president, and I believe that, and we work really hard to have relationships with our entrepreneurs. And I think building relationships with them now is more important than ever. Getting curious about what they need specifically and creating sustainable support for them. So at the foundation, we have what we call a suite of services that are operational programs that really wrap around our entrepreneurs and allow us a long period of time, sometimes years, to spend time with them to get to know them. And Brian, you said earlier, there are different ways that we can help small business now in terms of specific needs they have and assisting and training employees and managing workforce remotely and fostering strong culture. Well, as a support organization, we have to innovate at the speed of small business so that we can stay relevant and provide those specific programs for them in real time and partner with them in their success. And I believe that creates, as you said, Brian, more transformational support versus the transactional onesie twosie types situations. So we have had so much success with that across the nation. In fact, the Louisiana Economic Development Association has done this really better than most across the nation. And they do this by having these programs play off each other and have the micro business community be the pipeline that feeds into the small business community. So it's this wonderful ecosystem that's created ecosystem of sustainable support that in which everybody wins, the micro business, the small business owner, and eventually the economy.
So let's talk about how Endeavor has scaled this up. It's really kind of impressive how many you guys touch. So in terms of scaling up something from, where we need individual, right? Communicate relationships and we talk about mentorship and just the idea of how of this personal touch that is needed. And yet we also know that there are so many that could benefit. How do you scale it up?
It's a great question. Our organization started in the 90s in Latin America. So in Detroit, we've only been around for about 7 years. But since that time, we've learned a lot of lessons around what has worked and what hasn't worked. And to Carla's point and Colleen's point, the high touch support, which is why I said we became kind of almost a concierge service or a little black book of resources, that seemed to work because it's not a one size fits all. It's not let's throw curriculum at you. Let's not just throw, capital at you, but really try to understand each of the challenges that our founders are having. So it's kind of after 20 odd years, it's become more of a sustainable model because we have founders who've really benefited from Endeavor who then bring in other founders into the network. And there's a whole selection process. But it's really founders helping founders and people who are excited about the world of entrepreneurship, helping those that are in the network. So it's been a 20 odd year journey of learning what's worked and what hasn't worked and being scrappy and entrepreneurial and cutting what didn't work and, really doubling down on what does. We still have a lot of room for improvement. I think one area, because we work with later stage growth companies, is that, we have to be more intentional about building a more diverse pipeline because you have companies on the early side that, are doing an incredible job. But once you get to that 5 to 20 million mark, the pool looks almost monochromatic. And that's an area that we're trying to really double down on and be more inclusive across our organization to make sure that our next stage growth companies from that 10 to 100 plus are representative of our communities as well. But it's worked. I think the simple answer to your question is that it has worked. We've had incredible companies come out of our ecosystem. At this point, I think we've grown 27 companies to achieve unicorn status across the globe. And those are the ones who are really creating the relationships. They're spinning out new companies in the ecosystem. They're investing back into the ecosystem. And we're hoping we will play a continued important role here in across Michigan and the Great Lakes community.
So why don't we're almost out of time here. So I want to give Carla the last word because you have grown a business from a micro enterprise to really a good sized business. You've had to deal with a lot of these challenges. Let's focus in on you had to find people to fill roles in order to build on that success. Maybe just give a little insight as we close out this panel on how you were able to pull that off.
It was much easier to pull it off over the last 5 years than it is right now. I'll tell you that much. Everyone we're hiring right now, it's taking longer to hire. We're paying more, and we're leaning into culture to get them to want to work for us. So that's really important. But Brian, if you don't mind, I'd like to give the last word to Detroit Means Business, because of all the things that we've talked about. I think one of the most important things we can do is create an ecosystem that will scale. Detroit has 50 to 60,000 small and mid-sized businesses, and there are many honorable programs, incredible programs, but they're serving small numbers. So we need systemic solutions that serve a large number of companies with honor. And if I can get policymakers to do one thing, is to invest in people. Most of the support invest in programs, but we need more people who can actually work with each entrepreneur to help them resolve problems and remove barriers. So thank you for giving me the last word. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the panelists and your insight, your expertise as we continue this important discussion. So everybody that's a part of this, please just join back into the main stage where the programming will continue there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.